Hello, and welcome to On the Way. This is episode 4, and if you listen to the other episodes, you heard how God moved in my life, how He has taught me to listen to Him, and that I am now embarking on the biggest journey of my life. I did want to talk briefly about the name of the podcast and how it came to be before I got started with today's story. When I was with a family member, a very dear family member. I was talking to her about the podcast. She asked what the name was. And at the time I had a name, but it didn't really feel right. And anyway, as we were talking, she said, "Do you know the Tao?" Or I think Americans pronounce it Tao. It's T-A-O, which means path or journey. And I said, "I do." And she said, "On the way." And it just kind of came to her. And she even made that motion. She took her hand and went from the sky down to her. And I said, "Oh my gosh, that's perfect." And so I knew that would be the name. And I just wanted to share that because I've had some people ask, what's the meaning of that? Some people just assume it's because it's, on the way is sort of like path or whatever. So that's how the name came to be. But when a friend of mine, a colleague and a friend of mine, looked up On the Way on podcasts, there were a lot of people with the same name. I don't know if it's the same premise or the same idea, but I knew it was the right name. I prayed about it and was in meditation about it, so I knew it was the right name. So I thanked her, and here we are. Okay, so I take off mid-afternoon. I think it's mid-March sometime. And I head towards California. My first night, I had taken some back roads. I stayed away from interstates at first. And that's a long story, but I was inspired by someone who actually does that and shares it. But anyway, it was still winter/spring, wherever I was going to be going, going through the mountains to get to California, because I knew I was going to California first. And it turned out to be not such a good idea because of snow. So anyway, my first night, I can't tell you where it was. I don't remember the town, but it was some little town that had a Walmart. I don't know if I should say that, but I'm going to, because I had heard that you can park in their parking lots and sleep in the car. So I went into that local Walmart that night, and they said, "No, we don't allow that anymore." I guess some people had abused it and made messes. And so I said, okay. So I stopped at a gas station and asked the girl that was running it if she knew where I could park. And she said, "Well, you can park across the street over in that parking lot. A lot of truckers do, but I don't think that you're going to be safe there. So why don't you park in this parking lot?" And I said, "Okay, that sounds great." And so I got washed up for the night, had made my bed. So let me tell you a little bit about my living accommodations. I still have a 2020 Ford Escape, and it's got two backs. It's got a back seat, but they both go down for cargo, and one of them is a little bit wider than the other. So the wide one was down, and I had a cushion and a sleeping bag and a pillow. And the other one I left up, the other seat I left up, because I had a set of plastic drawers there for clothes and storage. So it was a nice little setup. And in the front seat, I had a little upper seat for my dog Bonnie to sit in, because she's just a little 10-pound dog and can't see out the windows. So she has a little, not really a car seat that you strap her in, but she sits up there and can see where we're driving. And so I had that in the front seat. And then on the floor, I have, food and whatever other things. And in my car door, I kept a bag with my toiletries to wash my face and do that kind of stuff in the morning and at night. So I had a pretty good setup. So I pulled into talked to this woman at the gas station. And as I was checking out, I decided I should purchase something because I was using the bathroom, and I always feel obligated that way. And I think I bought water or something. And as I was checking out, she said, "Where are you heading?" And so we struck up a conversation, and I told her about my mission. And she was so sweet, so kind. And I said, "Is it going to be okay if I park here?" And she said, "I just let my manager know, She was the assistant manager, I think. And they said, it's fine for you to park here. And I just called the local police to let them know not to bother you tonight. And I said, okay, that's great. And so as we were in conversation, I was telling her my mission. She said, I really needed to hear from someone like you tonight. I have been struggling with my faith. And to hear someone just sell their home and travel based on faith makes me think I've got to put a little more time into my relationship with God. So I felt very blessed and moved and excited because I thought, okay, here we go. So I spent the night there. It rained, which was lovely because I do have a full sunroof, moonroof, I don't know what you call it. So I could see the rain, and it was a beautiful night because I love rain and I love the sounds that it makes, and being in a car, it's a little echoed, so it's even better. So I was very much in a prayer of gratitude most of the night. That I met that sweet spirit, that she was so kind to me, and that she got to hear and feel God's love, and that I was being sent on this mission. So over the next couple of days, it was mostly driving and stopping where God led me. And I started making videos, which I've since taken down, but I was really making the videos for some friends who were questioning what I was doing and wanting to keep in touch, but mostly for my grandkids, so they could see where Omi was going. That's what they call me. And so I stopped at a reservoir and made a video there, and it was a little bit chilly out because it was kind of trying to snow, and being in nature always makes me feel close to God. And so it was just a great start to what my adventure was going to be. So then I get to Nebraska, and I didn't stay at hotels or Airbnbs very often, but there were times when I did, and this was one of the times. I was staying in a really lovely Airbnb in, I think it was Council Bluffs, Iowa, which is right by Omaha, because I was meeting a family member there who is going to share her story on here when I start talking to people and bringing them on these episodes, these podcasts and videos. But anyway, so I got to have dinner with her and her lovely daughter, and was so inspired by her. She is a beautiful, brilliant light that I am proud to say is my family member. I'm proud of her as a human being. The move that she's made in her life is nothing short of a miracle. So I can't wait to share her story. That's her story. I'm going to let her share it. But anyway, I got to spend some time with her. And then I was in Wyoming and got to visit my niece and her children, her 2 daughters. And we had a lovely visit, and I explained the whole, what I was doing and where I was going. And then on the way to California, I made sure that I went through Lake Tahoe because I had been there before, and it was snowy when I was there and cold, and I wanted to see it, when it wasn't covered in snow, even though it could have been when I was going through there, because here it's now towards the end of March. And because I was taking my time, I didn't drive, a million miles a day. I would stop and get gas or pick up something to eat, or I did have a little car fridge that I kept things in, but I would visit with people along the way and share my story as often as I could so they could feel God's love. And anyway, so I get into Lake Tahoe and I decide I want to have lunch. And I don't remember where it was that I stopped for lunch, but it was a nice little restaurant right on the water. And my waitress looked haggard. She looked tired and worn and like she needed some of God's love. And as I started talking to her, God's love just flowed out of me. And she really kind of lit up in a way that I didn't see when I first saw her. I saw it in her eyes, but she wasn't sharing it because I think she was just too tired. Whatever life was bringing her made her really tired at that point. And so I shared with her my story a little bit, and mostly God's love. And she thanked me, and we hugged, and it was beautiful. And I know that sounds small and maybe even trivial, but when you're in that moment with someone, it's powerful. It's powerful for you both. It's powerful for me because I am the one who got to bring it to you or to that person. But for that person, sharing with God how much they need Him, and then someone comes to them and brings Him to them, it's powerful. So as I left Lake Tahoe, I realized I was so blessed. I mean, I've known it, and I've said that over and over and over to God, to people, to myself. But to feel it on a level that you can't even describe really sings to my soul. I would sing to anybody's soul. It just really makes you feel validated as a child of God. Anyway, so I get to California, and I'm going to stay with a cousin. And he and his wife had graciously opened up their home to me as like a home base because I have a lot of family in the Bay Area. I was actually born in the Bay Area, and if I could afford it, I would live in the Bay Area because I absolutely love San Francisco. But so I was there to visit family, and I knew God would bring me to certain people who need to hear about Him while I was doing this. I just knew that my agenda was to see my aging family. So staying with my cousin, my dog was not happy. She loves people, but she's afraid of dogs. And she stress drools. And so she was creating puddles all over their house. And that was easy enough to deal with, but she stopped eating and then she stopped drinking. And so I said, let me take a break, get her out of here for a little bit. So I went and stayed in a really sweet town that I absolutely love staying in, and spend a couple of days there so that she could get de-stressed and start eating and drinking again. And then I moved. During that time, I had gone to my grandmother's grave. My grandmother had lived her whole life in Concord, which is where I was born, and I was very close to my grandmother. And she passed away at a very ripe old age of 96, long life. And I know where she's buried. And while I'm not one that pays a lot of attention to or has a need to go to those places because I don't feel that she's there, I know my grandmother. And I know that if she could, she would scold me for not bringing flowers to her grave. So I decided I would, every time I'm in the area, that I would do that. So that's what I did. But I can never remember because I go there so little that I couldn't remember exactly where her plot is, where she's buried with my grandfather. So we went into the office, talked to the girl. She gave me the directions and told me where to find it. And so I'm out there, and she came up behind me, and I was sitting there and putting the flowers down, and she said, "Oh, I was afraid you wouldn't find it." And I said, "Oh, no, I found it. It's good." Because when I was in the office, she wanted to come with me. And I said, No. You're probably busy. I can find it because I know the general area. But anyway, she came anyway. And it was very lovely. And we had a very sweet conversation. And I shared with her why I was there, what my mission was, and what I was doing. And because how that conversation starts, she goes, "You realize your grandmother's not here?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, no. This is for her because she would want me to do this." And she said, "Oh, okay." And that's how the conversation started, by this time I'd had several conversations with several people, and my journey didn't come up. I didn't just bring it up to put it in people's faces. It would come up in an organic way. And so when when our conversation was going that way, she said, "Can I watch your videos?" And I said, "Of course." And so I made a little video where I was staying that night, sharing her love because she brought me so much love. She had so much love to share. And I feel like I brought her some peace because she even mentioned that she really needed that day. And we just really So when that happens to me sometimes, it's not just two women talking or two human beings talking. To me, there's like a soul connection, and I feel like that's God. If you remember when I explained about how I felt God that day in the forest, it's a piece of that. And to me, God is in us and we are in God. And so when we connect with a human being on that level, you feel that. You feel God's presence. And it's the presence that she carries of God and the presence that I carry. And when you come together, it's just beautiful. And so we both really loved that moment together. And I she watched the video and she made a comment, a very sweet comment about our meeting. And so I was just relishing being there in the first place. So then I decided to go up north, a little further north. I had a aunt, which I didn't ever know as a child. Through 123andMe, my mother's biological father was brought into the picture. We now knew who he was, but it also opened up a lot of family. And so I had an aunt that I was going to meet for the first time and a cousin. And we had a lovely meeting. And my cousin worked on a farm ranch type property in Napa. And she invited me overnight. And I got to stay there. And we had a beautiful hike together. And I shared with her my mission. And I felt so connected to her. And we've connected on Facebook Messenger a couple of times, but it's been busy, I think, for both of us. And she was in Colorado and I couldn't get there, and so hopefully we'll get to connect again soon. I went further north and went up into the redwoods, and it was snowing, and I hiked in the snow. That's always so special for me. And I met a gentleman at the beginning of the trail who warned me not to take my dog in there because bears were waking up. And he said, if she poops, a bear's going to smell it and come after you. So I thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't bring her. And so as I decided to bring her anyway, he was coming out when I was going in. And so I went in, hiked for about, a couple hours. And I came back out and he was still sitting there. And he said, did you enjoy your hike? Blah, blah, blah. And we just started having a conversation. And he said something about how beautiful it was. I told him, when I'm in nature, I can't not feel God. And he looked at me like I was, he had a very suspect look on his face about me. And I said, I don't know what your beliefs are, but when I'm in nature, I can't not feel God. He's all around me. I always feel like I carry him. I can find him anywhere I look, but he is loudly around me in nature. And he said, I've been sitting here this whole time, waiting for you to come back out, just to tell me that. And I said, oh, really? Because I didn't know what you were going to tell me. But something told me to sit here and wait for you, that you were going to tell me something. And he had been struggling. He had lost his wife. And he had been struggling because he didn't think that it was fair that he lost his wife. And so we just sat there and had a lovely chat about how to get faith back. How to remember that God does love us, that he is in control, that there are things that we can't control, and there are things that are just supposed to happen. And I said, you had 32 lovely years with your wife. Had you had a choice, if God had said, you have a choice of 32 years or nothing, you would have chosen the 32 years. And he said, hands down. So anyway, it was a lovely little encounter. I don't know what happened to him after that. But I did feel love in his eyes again, where I didn't see it when I walked in. He almost looked sullen. So, finished up my hike, got in my car. I had another aunt to visit, my mother's sister. and I got to spend some time with her, and it was lovely. We cooked together and we laughed together, and just love her so much. And came back down to the Bay Area. It was around Easter time at this point. Stayed with my cousin. Bonnie did much better. She seemed to not be so stressed. I think she was just in the moment, and as I came back, she was fine. So I had a lovely Easter with my cousin, my aunt and uncle, and my cousins. Went to church with my other cousin and his wife and his son, and had a lovely Easter Sunday with them at church, and then they came over for the dinner, and I had a lovely time. But time was ticking, and I needed to be in Georgia by, I think I had a week, which was plenty of time to get across the United States, but I needed to get going. So I left with a heavy heart because I loved my cousin and his wife dearly and missed them, but I wanted to get going. So I went down the coast because I wanted to see the ocean. The ocean's always so important to me. Water is, but particularly the ocean. And went into Arizona, stayed with a lovely friend and her husband overnight. Just love her so much. And we had a lovely visit. Talked about my mission. She's a believer, and so we shared a lot. But I left bright and early the next morning and kept going. At some point, got to Oklahoma and set up a meeting with a dear friend of mine from childhood that I shouldn't say dear friend because we don't know each other that well. We knew each other because our parents were all deaf, and she was much older, but I thought she was so cool. And so we met and had lunch together, and that was so lovely. And on all this trip, on the trip across the United States, people are like, where did you sleep? So if I knew someone, like a friend or family member, I would stay with them if they invited me, and I would stay with them. Or what I typically did, what I did most of the time, I would find a Love's Travel Stop, and I don't know if you're supposed to say that, but I'm just going to do it. A Love Travel Stop, and I would pull my car in there because you can park overnight, and I had curtains to block the front and around my car. Actually, it was a blanket that I hung in my back window, and I would just shut the hatchback on it. I think that's what it's called. But anyway, and so I had curtains, and I would let Bonnie out to go to the bathroom. I'd go into the facilities and wash up for the night and go to bed. And I never felt unsafe. I've always felt safe at Love's truck stops. And there's truckers coming in and out all the time. There's people sleeping in their cars all the time. So I never felt unsafe. And I had Bonnie, so if there was something fishy going on outside of the car, she'd let me know. And they have great coffee. So it was a great way to start my morning. And then I got to Tybee Island and had a wonderful time with my girlfriends. I have some very good friends that I met as a nurse working in Colorado. A couple that I'm very, very close to all of them, but I have different relationships with all of them, and we had planned a girls' trip, and yeah, so that was a lovely time, and it was by the ocean. It was in the ocean. It was so good to just be that again, with my friends and yeah, be a different person. Bonnie stayed at my cousin's house. Thankfully, she's so lovely. She took care of my dog so that I wouldn't have to worry about Bonnie while the 6 of us had a good time. 5 of us had a great time. So that's the end of this episode. And I will record another one because this is getting long again. And I want to cut it off and get to the next episode. So I do want to remind you that if you have a story you want to share where God has moved in your life, I would love to have you on here with me. More people need to hear that He's here. And so if you would just email me at Tammy Blake, TAMIBLAKE, at TammyBlake.com, I will get back to you. I've got a few people lined up, and I'm excited to share their stories, or excited to have them share their stories with you. But if you've got one to share, let me know. So I will talk to you soon. And like I said, I'm going to just